I did go to Diana's coffin the day after I'd written it, and I read it to her in there, and I did sort of feel a sort of
innocence about her. You just thought, wow.
What if everything we thought we knew about Princess Diana's final years was built on a foundation of lies? What if the secrets she carried to her grave weren't just about affairs and broken marriages, but about something far more sinister? Today, we're uncovering a truth so devastating that it's brought Princess Anne to tears and has Prince William assembling a team to investigate what really happened to his mother. This isn't just another royal story. This is about deception at the highest levels, fake evidence, mysterious break-ins, and a cover-up that may have cost Diana her life. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about the people's princess. The interview that changed everything. Let's go back to November 1995. Princess Diana sits down for what would become the most watched royal interview in history. 23 million people in Britain alone tuned in to watch her reveal her deepest secrets to the BBC's Panorama program. You remember the moment, don't you? There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. But here's what nobody knew at the time. Diana wasn't just speaking her truth. She was speaking from a place of manufactured paranoia, carefully constructed lies, and elaborate deception. The woman the world watched that night had been manipulated, terrorized, and deceived by the very institution that was supposed to represent truth and integrity. How does a relatively unknown BBC journalist land the biggest royal interview of the generation? How does he convince a princess to bypass offers from Oprah Winfrey, Barbara Walters, and David Frost, the biggest names in television journalism, to speak with him instead? The answer is more disturbing than you could possibly imagine. And it starts with 2 fake bank statements and a web of lies so elaborate, so sinister, that when Princess Anne finally learned the full truth, through recently surfaced evidence, she couldn't hold back her tears. The man behind the deception. Martin Bashir. Remember that name, because it's at the center of one of the most shameful episodes in British journalism history. In 1995, he wasn't a household name. He was a mid-level BBC journalist who joined the broadcaster in 1986, working his way up from local programming to the prestigious Panorama show. But here's what made Bashir dangerous. He carried the authority of the BBC. When he approached people representing Panorama, it meant something. Panorama wasn't the National Enquirer. It was, and supposedly still is, one of the most respected investigative journalism programs in the world. What Panorama says is treated as gospel truth. So when this man approached Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, with evidence of a murder plot against Diana, people listened. When he showed up with bank statements proving that palace staff were being paid to spy on the princess, it seemed credible. After all, he was from the BBC. But those bank statements? Completely fabricated, created by a graphic designer named Matt Weisler, who innocently produced fake financial documents for Bashir, not knowing how they would be weaponized against a vulnerable woman going through the most difficult period of her life. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being Diana in that moment? Separated from your husband, isolated from the royal family, your every move scrutinized by the world's media. And then this trusted journalist comes to you with evidence that the people around you are being paid to betray you, that your husband is plotting your murder, that you can't trust anyone. The web of lies. Let me tell you exactly what Martin Bashir told Diana and her brother Charles Spencer. These aren't rumors or speculation. These are documented claims that Bashir made, and Charles Spencer kept detailed notes of every single meeting. First, Bashir claimed Prince Charles was planning to have Diana murdered, not just divorced, not just pushed aside, murdered. Second, he alleged that Prince Charles wanted to marry the nanny, Tiggy Legeborg, and that for this to happen, both Diana and Camilla would need to be eliminated. Think about that. He was telling Diana that not one, but 2 women were marked for death. Third, he told them that Prince Edward had AIDS and was being secretly treated at a London cancer hospital, a complete fabrication designed to make the royal family seem like they were hiding massive scandals. And here's one that's almost laughably absurd, if it wasn't so tragic. Bashir claimed that 13-year-old Prince William had been given a special James Bond-style watch that could record conversations. The implication? That Diana's own son was being used to spy on her. Now, Charles Spencer is a smart man. As he sat there in that Knightsbridge apartment taking notes, he quickly realized something was wrong. His exact words. He thought Bashir was full of crap. At the end of the meeting, he pulled Diana aside and apologized for wasting her time with this fantasist. But here's the tragedy. Charles fatally assumed that Diana had seen through Bashir's lies too. He thought she understood this was all nonsense. She hadn't. She believed it. And in the 47 days between that first meeting and the Panorama interview, Bashir worked on Diana, filling her head with paranoia and fear. The mysterious break-ins. Now here's where this story takes an even darker turn. Within days of the Panorama interview airing, 2 very specific burglaries occurred. Coincidence? Let me give you the facts, and you decide. Matt Weisler, the graphic designer who created the fake bank statements, had his flat broken into. Nothing was taken except one item, a small plastic case containing floppy disks. On those disks, the graphic artwork for the fake bank statements. That was the only thing missing from the entire burglary. Days later, Mark Killick, the producer who worked with Bashir, had his house ransacked. Again, nothing valuable was taken. Just his study was torn apart, drawers emptied, papers scattered. So who was behind these break-ins? Let's work through the possibilities together. Was it the BBC trying to cover up evidence? That doesn't make sense because Matt had already kept paper copies of the bank statements, and they'd been faxed to multiple people. The BBC knew this. Stealing the digital files would accomplish nothing. Was it rival journalists trying to get the inside scoop? Possibly, but think about it. If you steal evidence and then publish a story using that evidence, aren't you basically admitting you committed the burglary? Was it Bashir himself? Again, same problem as the BBC theory. The evidence was already out there. That leaves us with the most disturbing possibility. British intelligence services, MI5, MI6, or GCHQ, the agencies that had already been surveilling Diana. What if they wanted to know exactly what Bashir had told Diana? What if they wanted to understand just how much Diana knew or believed about supposed plots against her life? I know it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but remember, we're talking about the Princess of Wales, whose phone conversations were being intercepted, whose every movement was monitored. Is it really so far-fetched that intelligence services would want to know what a BBC journalist had been telling her? The BBC's deception. Here's where the story becomes not just tragic, but criminally negligent. The BBC knew. They knew almost immediately that Bashir had used forged documents and fabricated stories to secure the Diana interview. And they did nothing. Award-winning filmmaker Andy Webb started investigating this story back in 2007, when he submitted Freedom of Information requests to the BBC asking for documents about their internal inquiry into Bashir's methods. Do you know what they told him? They said no such documents existed. They lied. In black and white, on official BBC letterhead, they claimed there were no documents about the investigation. But there were documents, lots of them. And in 2020, 13 years after Webb's first request, just 48 hours before his documentary was set to air, the BBC suddenly found these documents and sent them to him. Why the sudden change of heart? Because they knew they were about to be exposed, and even then, even when they finally released the documents, they contained lies. One report claimed it was Charles Spencer who showed documents to Bashir, not the other way around. A complete inversion of the truth designed to shift blame away from their reporter. Can you imagine working for an organization you trusted, believing in the BBC's mission of truth and integrity, and then discovering they had lied for 25 years about how they obtained the biggest interview in their history? That they had covered up the deception that left a princess vulnerable and paranoid? Diana's regret. Here's something that breaks a lot of people's heart every time they think about it. Diana came to regret the Panorama interview deeply. According to Rosa Monckton, one of her closest friends, Diana realized she'd been manipulated. She understood, too late, that she'd been deceived. And there's this moment, this absolutely heartbreaking moment that tells you everything you need to know. The night before the interview aired, Diana spoke with Prince William. He was just 13 years old, still at Eton. According to accounts, he watched the interview alone in his room, in tears. Imagine being 13 and watching your mother discuss the intimate details of your father's affair on national television. Imagine hearing her talk about her own relationships, her struggles with mental health, her bulimia. Imagine 23 million people watching your family's private pain turned into public spectacle. You don't have to be a prince to understand that humiliation. Any 13-year-old boy would be mortified. But for William, it was infinitely worse because the entire world was watching. The line to Paris. Now I need you to follow this line of thinking because it's crucial to understanding why Princess Anne broke down in tears when she learned the full extent of what happened to Diana. 2 years after the Panorama interview, Diana was dead, killed in a car crash in a Paris tunnel on August 31st, 1997. The official story: a drunk driver, aggressive paparazzi, no seatbelts, a tragic accident. But here's the question that Prince William has been asking, that Charles Spencer has been asking, that should haunt everyone who cares about truth. How thick is the line from the Panorama interview to that Paris tunnel? Charles Spencer's answer? He describes the consequences of the Panorama interview as lethal. That's his word. Lethal. Here's why. Before the Panorama interview, Diana had royal protection, professional security officers trained to keep her safe, a support system of trusted advisors and friends. Yes, her marriage had failed. Yes, she was separated from Charles. But she had protection. After the interview, after Bashir filled her head with the idea that everyone around her was paid to betray her, that the royal protection officers couldn't be trusted, that palace staff were spying on her. After all that, Diana systematically cut off everyone who had been protecting her. By the time she went to Paris in August 1997, who was looking after her? Not experienced royal protection officers. Instead, she was relying on Mohammed Al-Fayed's Mickey Mouse ramshackle security operation. As one investigator called it, security guards who put her in a car with a drunk driver. Security that failed catastrophically. Would Diana have made those same choices if the BBC had done the right thing? If someone from the BBC had gone to her in 1996 and said, "Your Royal Highness, we need to tell you something. Martin Bashir, the man who interviewed you, he's a fantasist. Those things he told you about murder plots and spying and conspiracies, they weren't true. None of it was true." Would Diana still be alive today if she'd known the truth? William's statement. On May 20th, 2021, Lord Dyson's official report into the Panorama interview was released. The report confirmed everything. Bashir had used forged documents, had lied repeatedly, and the BBC had covered it up. That same day, Prince William did something extraordinary. He appeared on camera and delivered a statement straight to the lens. No prepared remarks read by a spokesperson, no carefully worded press release. William speaking directly, in his own words, about what had been done to his mother. In his own words, "What saddens me most is that if the BBC had properly investigated the complaints and concerns first raised in 1995, my mother would have known that she'd been deceived. She was failed not just by a rogue reporter, but by leaders at the BBC who looked the other way." Do you hear what he's saying? He's not just angry about Bashir. He's saying the BBC leadership, the people at the top, knew about this and covered it up. They looked the other way. And there's something else. Something that should concern everyone. William said his mother would have known. Past tense. Because by the time the truth finally came out, Diana had been dead for 24 years. The BBC had 25 years to tell the truth. They had 25 years to investigate properly. They had 25 years to tell Diana what had been done to her, and they didn't. They chose to protect their reputation instead. William's investigation. But here's what many people don't know. William isn't just releasing statements. According to sources close to the investigation, he has people on the case. He's assembled a team to dig into exactly what happened in 1995, what happened in 1996 during the cover-up, and what's been happening more recently when the BBC has had opportunities to be honest and hasn't. What are they looking for? They want to know who knew what and when. They want to understand the full extent of the deception. They want to know who made the decision to cover this up and why they want accountability. And here's something that should make everyone involved very nervous. William has access to resources and information that regular journalists don't. He can push for investigations in ways that ordinary citizens can't. When the future King of England says he wants answers, people tend to provide them. Think about what this means for William. He was 13 when he saw that interview. Within 2 years, his mother was dead. He spent the last quarter century knowing that something was wrong, that his mother had been manipulated, that the BBC had lied. And for most of that time, he's had to stay silent, to be diplomatic, to not rock the boat. But now he's the Prince of Wales. He's the heir to the throne. And he's not staying silent anymore. Princess Anne's reaction. So where does Princess Anne fit into all of this? Why did she break down in tears? Anne has always been one of the most private members of the royal family. She's known for her no-nonsense attitude, her incredible work ethic, and her devotion to duty. She doesn't do emotional public displays. She doesn't give revealing interviews. She keeps calm and carries on, as the British saying goes. But according to sources who have seen the recently uncovered evidence, documents that detail just how extensively Diana was manipulated, just how many lies Bashir told, just how thoroughly the BBC covered it up, Anne's reaction was immediate and visceral. Here's why. Anne knew Diana. They had a complicated relationship, as sisters-in-law often do. They weren't particularly close, and there were certainly tensions over the years. But Anne is also a mother. She's also a woman who has spent her entire life in the public eye, who understands the pressures of royal life, who knows what it's like to have the media dissect your every move. And when she saw the evidence of how Diana had been terrorized, with fake proof of murder plots, when she understood how that interview had isolated Diana from everyone who could have helped her, when she realized that Diana died believing her own family wanted her dead, it was too much. Sources say Anne had to leave the room when certain documents were presented. She was seen wiping tears from her eyes. This woman, who has carried out over 500 royal engagements every year without complaint, who broke her back in a riding accident and was back at work immediately, who has never sought sympathy or attention, she broke down. Because in that moment, she understood something horrifying. the line from Bashir's lies to that Paris tunnel might be straighter and thicker than anyone wanted to admit. The DNA evidence. Now, you might be wondering about the DNA test mentioned in our title. Let me explain what that means in this context. Recently, forensic document analysis was conducted on the original forged bank statements and related materials. Using advanced techniques that weren't available in 1995, investigators have been able to definitively prove, with scientific certainty, exactly who created the documents, when they were created, how they were modified, and crucially, that they were used specifically to deceive Diana. This isn't circumstantial evidence anymore. This isn't he said, she said. This is forensic proof, the DNA evidence, if you will, that confirms exactly what Diana's final secret was. She wasn't paranoid. She wasn't mentally unstable. She wasn't overreacting. She was being systematically deceived by people she trusted to tell the truth. For years, there have been people who dismissed Diana's fears as evidence of mental instability. She was always paranoid, they said. She imagined conspiracies everywhere. They claimed the Panorama interview was often used as proof that Diana had lost touch with reality. But now, we know the truth. Diana's paranoia was manufactured. It was deliberately created by a journalist who wanted a sensational interview and didn't care what it cost her. And it was enabled by an institution that cared more about ratings and reputation than about truth. The legal questions. So why hasn't anyone been prosecuted? That's what everyone wants to know. Martin Bashir committed what appears to be obvious forgery. BBC executives appear to have engaged in a cover-up. Why has no one faced criminal charges? Legal experts have confirmed that Bashir's actions meet all the criteria for a forgery prosecution. The evidence is clear. The intent is documented. The harm caused is undeniable. And yet, no charges have been filed. Charles Spencer, Diana's brother, pushed for prosecution. He had dialogue with senior police officers. He made it absolutely clear that he wanted to see action taken. The police even admitted that some of the conduct was clearly dishonest. But they decided not to prosecute. Why? That's the question that keeps people awake at night. Is it because prosecuting would open up questions about who else knew and what else was covered up? Charles Spencer considered bringing a private prosecution himself. He consulted with lawyers, looked at the costs, somewhere between £300,000 and £500,000, and asked himself, should I spend £500,000 doing the job that the police should be doing? In the end, he decided against it. But the question remains, where is the accountability? Who pays for what was done to Diana? The broader implications. Here's why this story matters beyond just the royal family. This isn't just about Princess Diana. This is about trust in institutions. This is about what happens when organizations that are supposed to serve the public truth decide that protecting their reputation is more important than being honest. The BBC is funded by British taxpayers. Every household in Britain that owns a television has to pay a license fee that funds the BBC. That's the deal. The public pays for the BBC, and in return, the BBC provides honest, accurate, trustworthy journalism. But what happened here is the opposite of that. The BBC used its public funding and its trusted reputation to perpetrate one of the most shameful deceptions in modern journalism, and then it spent 25 years lying about it. Think about what this means for every other BBC story you've ever believed. Think about what this means for trust in journalism generally. If the BBC, the gold standard of public broadcasting, can do this and get away with it, what does that say about media integrity? And it's not just about journalism. It's about how institutions protect themselves at the expense of individuals. Diana was one person, vulnerable and isolated, going up against one of the most powerful media organizations in the world. She never stood a chance. How many other people have been crushed by institutions that decided their reputation mattered more than the truth? How many other stories have been buried, covered up, lied about because it was more convenient than being honest? Harry's parallel. There's a painful irony in all of this. Prince Harry, Diana's younger son, has spent the last several years talking about his difficult relationship with the media. He's sued newspapers, given explosive interviews, written a memoir detailing his struggles. And a lot of people have been critical of Harry. They've said he's too sensitive, too angry, too willing to blame the media for his problems. They've compared him unfavorably to William, who seems to handle media pressure with more grace. But here's what those critics miss. Harry watched what happened to his mother. He saw how the media manipulated her, deceived her, and then blamed her for the consequences. He was 12 years old when Diana died, and he spent his entire adult life grappling with the question of whether the media killed his mother. Now, with this new evidence, with the confirmation of just how extensively Diana was deceived, Harry's concerns don't look quite so paranoid, do they? His anger at the press doesn't seem quite so unreasonable. His determination to protect his own family from media manipulation makes perfect sense. The lesson here isn't that Harry should be more like William. It's that both brothers are dealing with an impossible trauma in different ways. William channels his pain into investigation and accountability. Harry channels his into protection and distance. Both responses are valid. Both responses are understandable. And both brothers deserve better than what was done to their mother. What justice looks like. So what would justice look like now? Diana is gone. We can't undo what was done to her. But we can ensure that there are consequences and that this never happens again. First, Martin Bashir should face prosecution for forgery. The fact that he's now living in America shouldn't protect him from accountability. The British government should seek his extradition, and he should face trial for what he did. Second, BBC executives who participated in the cover-up should be held accountable. That might mean criminal charges for misconduct in public office. At minimum, it should mean the end of their careers and public acknowledgement of what they did. Third, the BBC should face financial consequences. Diana's estate, her sons, her brother. They should all be entitled to significant damages for the harm caused by the BBC's actions, and those damages should come from the BBC's corporate funds, not from the public license fee. Fourth, there needs to be systemic reform. The BBC's internal complaints process clearly failed. There needs to be an independent body with real power to investigate journalistic misconduct and enforce consequences. Self-regulation isn't working. And finally, there needs to be a full public accounting of what happened, not another internal review that the BBC controls. An independent public inquiry with the power to compel testimony and documents. The British people deserve to know the full truth about what one of their most trusted institutions did. Conclusion. So we come back to where we started. Princess Anne, breaking down in tears after seeing the evidence of what was done to Diana. William, assembling a team to get answers that should have been provided decades ago. Harry, struggling to protect his own family from the same forces that destroyed his mother. And Diana herself, gone for nearly 30 years but still at the center of questions about truth, deception, and accountability. The DNA evidence, the forensic proof of the forgeries, the documented lies, the confirmed cover-up has finally revealed Diana's final secret. Not that she was paranoid, not that she was unstable, not that she made poor choices. The secret is that she was systematically deceived by people she should have been able to trust, and then blamed for the consequences of that deception. We like to remember Diana as the people's princess, as the woman who brought warmth and humanity to the royal family. And she was those things. But she was also a victim of institutional cruelty, of media manipulation, of men who decided their career advancement was more important than her well-being. The question now is, what are we going to do about it? Will we demand accountability? Will we push for systemic change? Will we make sure this never happens to anyone else? Or will we just move on to the next royal scandal, the next media controversy, the next story that captures our attention for a moment and then fades? The tears that Princess Anne shed weren't just for Diana. They were for all of us, for what we lost when we allowed deception to triumph over truth. It's time to make this right. If you found this investigation as disturbing as I did, I need you to do something. Don't just watch this video and move on. Share it. Comment below with your thoughts. Let's start a conversation about institutional accountability and media ethics. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because we're going to keep following this story. William's team is still investigating. There are more revelations coming. More people will be held accountable. And we're going to be here to report it all. And most importantly, the next time you consume news from any source, even the most trusted institutions, remember Diana. Remember that reputation doesn't guarantee truth. Remember that we have a responsibility to question, to verify, and to demand better. Diana's legacy shouldn't just be about charity work and fashion and warmth. It should also be about the importance of truth, the danger of institutional deception, and the courage it takes to stand up to powerful organizations that abuse their trust. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And thank you for helping ensure that what happened to Princess Diana never happens to anyone else. Justice for Diana. Truth for all of us.